Hey everyone, Mike here, checking in on what we call our sales timeline. We've talked about so many topics the last couple times we've been together. We always put the timeline from call to close kind of as a continuum, right? The very beginning to the very end. And today, in the call to close or the sales continuum, I want to talk today about the initial meeting. The initial meeting in this day and age could be a virtual meeting, a Teams, Zoom. It could be an actual meeting face to face, could be in a boardroom in front of people presenting via PowerPoint. It could be one on one in a coffee shop. Whatever your first real meeting, the way you would deem it, that's what we're going to talk about today. So, a couple things I want to make sure I hit before we get into the actual initial meeting. And this is really big for me. I call it to become a separator. To become a separator as a consultant in sales, it's all about intelligence, about information. I talk a lot about this in my events, is doing your homework, using social media to your advantage, LinkedIn, going to their website, business journals, if they've been quoted. Can you get to know about their beliefs, their company, their history, anything that you can get about that individual, the group of the people you're going to be meeting with? So important before you get into that initial meeting. And because what you're going to do as you set up that initial meeting is a technique that we call pre-framing. Pre-framing, you've heard me use this before. Pre-framing, pre means before, frame is what you put around it. Pre-framing the initial meeting is so important because you're setting the tone, you're setting the table for what's going to happen. There's another technique that's in the same vein. We call this future pace. Future pace is like pacing people into the future. So if you pre-frame someone well, you've actually done a good job of pacing them into the future. One of my favorite little mini scripts I like to use is something like this. So, hey, Tom, here's how it usually goes. And I'm giving an idea of how it typically works in my world, how a meeting would typically go. When I meet with people like yourself, it typically goes like this, something to that effect. I like to let people know kind of what the expectations are going to be up front. So I'm setting the table for how that meeting is going to go. So if you have to draw from old resources or how it typically goes with other people, here's how what you've done in the past. Here's what my company typically does for clients like you. That's another little mini script you can do. You're setting the table as a pre-frame for what you're about to do at the initial meeting. So pre-framing and setting the table are so important. Now, remember, the intel is right there. Like you have to have the intel before you can even get to the pre-frame, before you can get to the actual initial meeting. So assuming you've done those, you've got your intel, you've done all your homework, you've set the meeting up well, you got the right people, you got the right person, meaning the decision maker, because you've asked the right questions up front. Very important. A lot of people take a meeting just to get a meeting. You're 10 minutes in the meeting and the decision maker is not there. Or worst case, they're not the decision maker whatsoever because you didn't ask. So finding the right person to go to is so important. A little bit of a subtle thing, but very important point to hit. But let's actually go into the actual initial meeting. One of the things I'm really big on is going in with a curious mindset. My rule number one, obviously, is don't judge, be curious. Be curious about the person, the group, the company. So that means you have to be equipped with questions in advance. Now, of course, I'm a fan of the journal or the notebook. I'm not shy about bringing my journal or my notebook to my meetings. I open it up, I date it, put their name or their company name right on top of the page, blank, and I set the meeting right up front that, hey, I'm here to learn. I'm here to listen. I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to fill up a page. I'm going to fill up 2 pages. Now, I do it very subtly. I don't sit there buried with my head down. I eye contact, right? I just take little subtle notes as I'm going. Now, if I have 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, the more time I have, the more information I'm going to gather because that's going to be the separator between me and everybody else that's going to be competing against me. So that's why it's so important that you have your questions set in advance. This is where the intel comes in, right? So if you've done your homework about the history of the company, you're going to have questions about that. If you've done your homework on this individual, and you've seen their lineage within maybe their industry, you have questions about that. Tell me how you came into this company. What attracted you to this organization? Hey, what do you love about your leadership role? These are great questions to ask in that initial meeting because you're putting yourself in a consultative frame. Now, it's important at the very beginning of the meeting to let people know this. That's why I say that initial meeting is so important to let people know how it typically goes. So I usually go something like this. Hey, John, it's really nice that you give me half hour of your time. I always start with gratitude or some sort of effect. I get the niceties out. Hey, how's the weather? Hey, have you gone to the golf tournament in town? What's been going on with a post-holiday? Get the niceties out of the way. So I always start with gratitude, right? And the niceties. Then I get to it. So, Hey, one thing I wanted to let you know up front is I like to come into these meetings curious. I actually have a list of questions that I've developed up front specifically for you and your company, if you don't mind. At some point during our meeting, I want to ask those questions. I'm a big note taker. I don't have the best memory, of course, but I like to take notes. I'm being humble and funny as I'm saying this, right? Lets them know that's why I got my journal out. And usually you get a nod. They're like, yeah, that sounds great. And then you take the lead with the meeting. Now, really important. If your presentation is really deck heavy, meaning you're there to do a PowerPoint or you have some kind of a tablet slide presentation, you really have to pre-frame. You really have to set the table because when you pull out the deck or the tablet or something that's going to be shot up on a board of some sort, their brain naturally goes into, okay, how many slides is this? How long is this going to go? All these curiosities going because they don't know. But if you've done a good job pre-framing and setting the table up front and you say, hey, by the way, yeah, I have a tablet. I'm going to show you. I have 8 slides on here. I'm going to go through these very quick. I'm going to give this to you at the end. It's got a lot of subnotes in there for you and your team to study in the next week and follow up. But I just want to let you know, I'm going to go through this real quick. It's going to talk about the features and the benefits of my organization. But the reason why I'm really here is to ask questions, to get to know you better, to understand your company. We'll get to this stuff. You can probably read about this on my website. I can send it to you after the fact. That's fine. But my real meeting for this initial time is to get to learn who you are and about your company. That's what the initial meeting is all about. I see so many times people are pumped up to get that initial meeting and they go up and they show up and they throw up, right? They just regurgitating information, history of their company, how great they are to the competition. They're not listening. They're not engaging. It's at least a 50-50 exchange, that initial appointment. It's not 80 you, 20 them. Okay. And it's certainly not 90 them, 10 you. That means they hijacked the meeting and they took control. So if you follow the timeline, do your homework, pre-frame, set the tone for the meeting. Hey, I'm only going to be here for 20 minutes. I've got 7 slides. My goal for this meeting is set those expectations up front, pull out the journal, show it to them. Say, hey, I've got some questions I want to ask you. I'll put some homework into this meeting and what you say is important. And I'm going to take notes in this meeting. Great pre-frame. So you're setting the table for that meeting because I can promise you most people don't do this. They go there, they're nervous, they present. We are not presenters, we are consultants. And we're consultants, we diagnose. We diagnose the challenge, the pain, what keeps them up at night, what are their business problems, having a business conversation with this leader so that you can understand how to solve it. That's the outcome. There's been times where in a meeting, I prepared a deck, it's something great, I'm going to present a tablet, and I get in there and I pivot and I realize, done my pre-frames, I can feel the energy of the room, I'm getting great questions, great answers. I'm at the 25-minute mark and I'm like, I don't have time to pull out this deck. That's okay. You know what? I don't need to get to my stuff. I can send it to them. We can do a follow-up. But I have gained all the information. I got all my gold nuggets out and I've done everything I can to extract everything because I've done my question sets up front and I got those on the table and I didn't have time, frankly, to get to what I wanted to present. So it's important that you go in with that curious mindset, understanding pre-framing, get those questions out. That's what's going to be the separator. The separator is gathering that information because on future modules, I'm going to show you what to do with that, with those gold nuggets, that information that you gather in that initial meeting to do something amazing in the follow-up. Thanks and good luck.